Hello, welcome to Good Games Role Played, episode 160. I'm Clint, aka JCM. With this week is Isli.
Yo.
And Messiah.
Hello.
And while it wasn't a huge week in news, there were some huge things that happened. We won't necessarily go into it for too long, but before we jump into the Microsoft issue, I want to kind of follow back up on that Helldivers 2 situation that we talked about last time, where immediately, like the morning I was like that night, after we recorded and I post next morning, they reversed their decision. Like, okay, our bad. we realized we got to work better to support our PC players, yada, yada. So
nobody saw that coming.
It was quick. Like I expected, like, okay, if they do it, it'll probably be Monday, but it was like Sunday night and that, like, it was a tweet out. I was like, okay. But, and then they did like a campaign to positively review bomb Helldivers on Steam. And I forgot to check up on it and see what it was, looking like. But so there was like a campaign. I was like, okay, all the people that, are like, hey, Sony bad. Like, are you going to go back in and change your review? Because I'm like, there was a lot of negative reviews there. And then it's sitting at mixed still. And if I look at the graph, yeah, it looks like a lot of the... See, I'm curious how this works. So there was a huge review bump on the 6th, which is after they did it. But I can't tell, like, okay, it seems like there's still a majority of people who haven't fixed it. Because, yeah, it's still... All reviews are mostly positive, but it's still mixed on recent reviews. So it seems like a lot of people haven't gone back in and changed it. And I went in and I looked at some of the views because I was curious. I'm like, okay, how many of these people actually played the game? And aren't just, like when you get like those bad apples that join like a peaceful protest, they're not there for the thing, and they just mess around. I'm like, okay, how many people are doing this? And I looked at it, it's like, there's a good amount of reviews I saw that were like 0.2 hours played. It's like, okay, so you bought it, refunded it, and just said a review that usually was a couple words like Sony bad or, this and that. Like, it wasn't even like you just hopped on the negative review train.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, why is this? It's like, those are so goofy. But anyways, there were some like obviously a lot of legit ones in there, people like hundreds of hours and whatnot. But the issue that's weird is that they haven't relisted the game back in the regions that they delisted, which is kind of the main issue that we saw, that we talked about. Like, okay, in countries that have PSN, boohoo, whatever, just do it. But for the countries that don't, that's the issue. And they haven't reversed that yet. And they asked, Arrowhead, like, hey, what's going on? And the CEO said, like, it's not his decision. Like, that's on Sony. But they've since updated it to block the Baltics, as well as all those same regions are blocked on Ghost of Tsushima. Because that game, they haven't reversed their online stance on that game, as far as I know, because it hasn't released yet. And I figure if they put that up front, like, hey, if you don't play Ghost of Tsushima multiplayer, you have to link to PSN, because it's at the start. That's okay. Mm-hmm. Because it's like, then at least they're telling you, versus a change, 2 months or whatever after the game launched, which is the problem. So it's weird. I'm like, okay, are you just not going to have Helldivers 2 in those other regions? Like you reversed your decision for this game. I feel like you should re-add those. So I'm curious what's going to happen there.
The person in charge of the store listings is on vacation, ironically.
Yeah. Right, there you go. Yeah, they're currently out of office. I'm getting audited applies in the request, but yeah, it's Ghost is still, Ghost is on there. So, which I kind of expect. I didn't think they would go back on their Ghost decision, but so then there was that, and then we all know that Microsoft had a big thing, which we'll talk about. But in the midst of that, Nintendo confirmed that they're going to have a June showcase, and then they just tweeted out like, yeah, we're working on a Switch successor. It was from the president of Nintendo. Just tweeted out like, yeah, we got a successor. It's coming fiscal year. It won't be at the showcase. Like, just a super early tweet. Well, probably not early for him in this time zone, but it was just like, yeah, it's in the works.
Yeah, he's like, I'm just going to squash the rumor right now because you all can't control yourselves. We're going to have a showcase in June. The Switch 2 isn't going to be there. Because we're still working on it. It's like, yeah, was that a slip up or did you do that on purpose?
Yeah, and like there's so many spec leaks that have been coming out beforehand, and then even after the fact, like, or as well as for the rumored PS5 Pro, a lot of we haven't really touched on just because we're waiting for the official confirmation. Because then at least when they officially announce it, because there's rumors from Jeff Grubb that PlayStation's going to have a May showcase, which would be like their E3. Instead of doing it in June, they're going to do it in May. And according to his sources, they say they're still on track, but I'm assuming they're trying to put some distance between this Helldivers debacle, especially if it's just a pre-recorded, video. They can put it out whenever they want. But I'll wait till they announce the PS5 Pro. And if they do it in a similar fashion to the PS4 Pro, maybe not have a long like tech talk with Mark Cerny, but like showing the difference between like, here's a game, and then here's the game on the Pro, just like they did. Like, hey, here's Horizon on the Pro, so you could see those the checkerboard rendering, all this stuff they did there. So if they have one of those, that'll be good, because then I can at least see it. If I can watch like the 4K VOD and be like, okay, I can see the changes here, yada yada, versus just the speculation that like I've watched the Digital Foundry videos, which is like until I see it, that's what matters. But yeah, we'll see how quickly they do that. But yeah, Microsoft, they shut down a bunch of studios. This week they closed Tango Gameworks, Arcane Austin, and then another one. They Alpha Dog Games shut them down as well. Well, actually, they're going to be, and then Roundhouse Studios is going to be absorbed into ZeniMax Online Studios, who does Elder Scrolls Online. But yeah, they just shut down a bunch of them, and everybody's surprised about Tango, considering Hi-Fi Rush came out. And there's a lot of really good discussions. I would say definitely check out. Kind of Funny had one that was really good. Because I like theirs because Greg Miller had a lot of queued up historical tweets from like Matt Booty and video clips from like a documentary they talk about when they closed Lionhead from back in like 2019. They're talking about this in a doc. Like, yeah, and we closed Lionhead, and then we looked back on that and figured out, how not to get in that kind of situation again, like one of those talking head moments in the documentary. But they had a lot of really good reference points in that. I'd say definitely give that a watch. Or even like a podcast unlocked from IGN, like a lot of good discussions there. But yeah, it was just like a week of my Twitter timeline just being filled up with devs being like, what the fuck?
God, I know. Mm-hmm. So everything happened. So I step back with Helldivers. First of all, I'm shocked that Sony, I'm like mildly shocked that Sony reversed it. I thought that Sony would just kind of say, no big deal. But Sony reversing it's just kind of interesting to me because they got a shit ton of bad press, but I don't think they're really going to get the good press because the good press isn't nearly as popular. So reversing it is kind of like, the damage is done. What's the point now? Though I guess cool for the Helldivers community, I am worried about the precedent of review bombing a game just to get your message across. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I like that or not, because you're not damaging the right people. And one of the discourses I saw is that if you have bonuses or things that are based on reviews or scores, which we know is kind of something that happens, if you review bomb a game in order to get your message across to Sony, you could also be impacting the people who actually worked on the game, like their salary or bonuses, because the Metacritic score is low now.
Well, I guess, but do they look at Metacritic user reviews? I mean, they obviously look at outlet reviews, but
I don't know if we've ever seen like a good. I think we know this exists from people being like, right, like on the side being like, we didn't hit our review mark or something, so we don't get bonuses. But I don't know if we know how it works yet. I wouldn't be surprised if it's somewhat of an aggregate of the two.
I mean, I guess if you're, because I've heard that from people, but they talk about like it's from the outlets. I'd be curious if they were to look at something like if you only launched on Steam, because like obviously the PlayStation Store has like a upvote, and I think they used to have like a star system. They might still have it. But yeah, it'd be weird if they only looked at, because then you run into that. But typically that's
seems like a lot to risk.
Yeah. And I get it. Like, it's also like, if it works, because I've seen before in the past where like complaints about something has gotten something to change. Like obviously we've seen it with, going way back to Infamous 2, like when they changed Cole, and then Greg Miller on IGN Podcast Unlocks, like he looks horrible, and then all the audience kind of agrees. They weren't going on Twitter, but there was just a big like, hey, this character design doesn't look good. So then they reversed it and made it look more like Cole from Infamous 1, or like the Sonic the Hedgehog design initially in that movie, and then they changed it last minute. And it's just, at least those are more like people just saying like, kind of ragging on a design, being like, yo, what's up with this? And then they change it versus like preemptively review bombing. But yeah, if you review bomb, like you said, unless it's the developer, like with the situation you talk about with Escape from Tarkov, it's like it's on them, versus this being on Sony. And it's like, yeah, how do you can't really like review bomb Sony themselves. Like I guess you could on, I don't know, other products that are direct with Sony, like review bomb the PlayStation 5 or something. But
I mean, it worked, so it clearly was effective. I'm like, oh, man, I feel like this is a dangerous precedent to set.
I feel like it only worked because of the press around it. The problem with like review bombing is, I mean, the thing that we're seeing with Helldivers right now is people join the bandwagon just to join it. Like people who haven't played the game, they bought the game so they could review it and then they refunded it. Like that's damaging to the developer. And I know the developer's in a situation where like they were like, hey, do this, and hopefully obviously knowing like what people were going to do and the consequences and stuff like that. But it's also hard to reverse because now you have this mixed review and all of these bomb reviews, but the people who joined it just to join it and be shitheads aren't going to go and change their reviews. They're not going to, if they were the people that went and bought it just so they could review it and refunded it, they're not going to take the time to go back in and change the review. Now you're going to have that, all of those bogus negative reviews are permanent, basically.
Yeah. And also it's like the people that could be interested in the game, and might look at that and see that mixed review who aren't like hardcore. Like when I'm into a game, I'm not subscribed to every subreddit. You know what I mean? Like when I was playing Apex, I played that for a couple of years. Like I was, because like, oh, that's where I'd see announcements. That's where the patch notes would get posted, yada, yada. I'm not, you know, I don't subscribe to all the other subreddits. Like FF14 was like the last one. Like I don't do that. So unless you like, if you're not hardcore and browsing the Reddit, which is like the most hardcore fans, it's such a flash in the pan what happened. Like it started Friday, resolved Sunday. You're going to see mixed reviews. You're probably not going to know like what the hell happened. And then you go and read them and you're like, it's not a thing anymore. The stuff that everybody's complaining about, but it's like just the front end of it looks like, oh, I was interested in this game, but it's got like mixed reviews. Like what was the controversy? You don't know. And then you got to like dig into it and this and that. But, and it's like, yeah, if it works, it's like, how do you measure that? Like, reserve that kind of, you know, quote unquote consumer power for things that matter. Like again, with Helldivers, the delisting in countries that didn't have PSN was like the biggest thing. And so it's like, okay, that's good, but they haven't relisted those countries. And then complaining about it also allows for, because I believe Steam was also expanding their refund policy, because typically it's like that 2 hours is the limit, but it's like, yo, they completely changed the terms to play this game. So it seems like, okay, then you can refund it. And like, that's how you can hit back. You just, you know, refund your game if you're not going to play anymore and you've played for like hundreds of hours or something. But then, yeah, how do you do it for if it's something that doesn't matter? Or it's like, it's not a big deal. Or it's, you know, it's like, oh, they have a battle pass, boo, and then like review bomb. Right. Like, it's like, yeah, how do you deal with that? Because you're not going to, like, I don't know. I feel like that's more like a Steam policy thing. Like, this is something that had more significance versus like, I guess, any other kind of review campaign, I suppose.
Yeah, it to me just feels like the damage might be greater than what they can fix with positive review bombing.
Yeah, because like with Hi-Fi Rush, you know, going back to how we're like bouncing around between the Helldivers situation and the Microsoft thing, but Hi-Fi Rush is being like positively review bombed, and it's like now it's the most highest rated game that Microsoft has because people are, you know, which is really funny. And that's like, yeah, do that. Cause then you can make like, hey, this is the best reviewed game by consumers for a studio that you just let go and you'll never reach those marks because you're a bunch of goobers.
So, I mean, the Hi-Fi Rush thing is just so interesting for so many reasons of like, obviously Microsoft quoted many times that they weren't going to close the studio, that they were happy with it, and then they turned around and closed it.
Yeah,
like that seems like a worthy cause of like, hey, send a message somehow. The studio, you said you wouldn't close, now you closed. Your business practices are, it just, the Microsoft situation feels like much more of an actual business concern than Sony saying, hey, you have to sign up for a PSN account, which, to be honest, it's a Sony exclusive game. I feel like that's coming in the future. You're going to have to sign up for a PSN account to play their online games.
Yeah, well, that's what they talked about, like that it was going to be a requirement, but they wanted to get the game, they wanted to push it to have more people play it. But it's like, so they didn't say that, and they didn't update their Sony's, term requirements on, hey, do I need a PSN account to play a game on Steam? So it's like, that's and he even said, the CEO of Arrowhead said, like, part of this is on me because I knew it was coming, but I told Sony to push it because I wanted more people to play the game, but we didn't really communicate that to the player base. So it's like Sony had this decision for the multiplayer. It didn't launch that way like they wanted. He pushed it, and it comes in later. So it's like, but really there also should have been more communication from Sony, like, hey, changes are coming to Sony PC games with multiplayer. Like, there should have been communication. And that's kind of what it comes down to. It's like any issue in a relationship. It's all about communication. But so it's like, yeah, if they had launched this way, it wouldn't have been a problem. But yeah, it's just like, you didn't say anything like, hey, by the way, it's not now, but it will be later. It's like, there's just nothing.
Just saying like, this is going to be implemented on this date, probably would have solved a lot of issues, and probably would have, genuinely raised a lot of concerns. Like, hey, you're going to do this, but it's not available in my region. Can you figure out what to do about it in the meantime? Yeah.
Now, like the Microsoft one, I don't know how you avoid that. You posted a really good link of why it happened, that basically pointed to, Microsoft spent a ton of money on Activision. So now, previously, they could have studios that didn't make a shit ton of money or weren't extremely profitable. But now, because they spent so much money on Activision, every studio they have has to make, major profits, or else it gets closed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you avoid that. That was a really interesting article, and I feel like we haven't seen the full ramifications. And then there was the follow-up leak that said that more closures were on the way from Microsoft that just hadn't been announced yet.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. Like, it's, I don't know. And it's like, yeah, like even the quotes from like Phil Spencer and yada yada, just like, saying, quote, like when a team like Rare wants to do Sea of Thieves, when a team like Obsidian wants to do Grounded, or Tango wants to do Hi-Fi Rush, when everyone thought they'd do Evil Within 3, I want to give the teams the creative platform to go and push their ability to push their aspirations. The one thing I'm curious about Tango is Shinji Mikami left. So I'm wondering if it's like, okay, the person who founded this studio, which was what made it interesting from the start, is gone. Maybe was there, like, I'm curious behind the scenes, like, was there someone in the pipeline to take his place? Was there an interim, person there? Like, I'm curious, like, if maybe they were struggling, like, figuring out who to move up, or did they really only care about Mikami? Was like, oh, he's gone now. The value to them, the value of the studio. It's like if, Kojima leaves Koji Pro, and, a couple of his, closest buds leave as well. It's like, is Kojima Productions the same without him? Granted, that's an instance where like he's like very much that auteur kind of person who has some great people that work with him, but if they all leave together, it's like, to the publisher, is the value of that studio diminished because you lost that creative? Like, if Tim Schafer is no longer Double Fine, but everybody else is still there, is it still Double Fine? Same with like, we saw that, in a smaller scope with like Uncharted 4, like when Amy Hennig left, it's like, okay, Uncharted 4 changed entirely from what it was going to be. It's like, there was concerns like, will it still be Uncharted now that you've lost that person? Now, luckily, they had some good people on the team with Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley and whatnot to help do that. But they also had like The Last of Us under the belt, and they had worked on the other Uncharted games. So it's like, okay, they were able to take the lead and take over that project and create a good game.
Well,
but
and even so, there's still a lot of debate that Naughty Dog, after losing Amy, is not as good. Like, people still debate that The Last of Us 2, because of Neil Druckmann, was a bad game.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah,
there's a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's more to it, but like that was definitely one of the discourses, is that it was because Neil Druckmann as the lead was not as good. That was at the time, that was one of the explanations or discourses that was going around. So even though it came out and reviewed really well, it still suffered from, she's gone. Is the studio what it used to be? Is Naughty Dog going downhill?
Well, it's also like Amy Hennig wasn't because who did, she did Legacy of Kain, and then that came out. Legacy of Kain Defiance came out in 2003. Then she went to Naughty Dog in 2004 for Jak 3, where she was the game director. And then she was the creative director and writer then she spawned the Uncharted IP. Did 1, 2, and 3, was a consultant on Golden Abyss. So it's like the IP she created, but Naughty Dog itself wasn't founded as a Amy Hennig studio. You know what I mean?
No. I think the explanation I always heard
Tango.
was she balanced out Neil Druckmann's ideas, which I could see that being a thing of you need the two people and they just end up working well together and balance each other out. But yeah, I mean, with Tango, God, when did he leave the studio though? For Tango,
it was recent. It was after they announced Hi-Fi Rush.
So it was after he worked on Hi-Fi Rush then.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was a producer. He didn't really work on it, but he had left in 2023 after he felt like his responsibilities towards the ongoing projects Tango were kind of taken care of. But he left in 2023.
I was curious if he had an impact on Tango or Hi-Fi Rush.
Well, I mean, he had to have some, but that was a smaller team that did Hi-Fi Rush. It wasn't he wasn't there because it was someone else. The director was, I forget his name, but when they announced it, the director of Hi-Fi Rush was someone else who worked at that studio. It wasn't Mikami. So it was that's why the discussion of we want small games like Hi-Fi Rush, and then then why did you close Tango when they did Hi-Fi Rush? And then people well, it took them 4 years to make. It's no, they came up with an idea that took a year, but that's because they were doing Ghostwire Tokyo. They weren't a 2-team studio. It was hey, I had this idea for a game. They kind of demoed it or whatever, and they went into it later. But it was still a small team that did Hi-Fi Rush. But yeah, he left and then started his new studio around March of this year. I don't know if we talked about that or not, but yeah, because
I feel like these directors just start a studio, stay for one game, leave, and start another new studio.
Yeah, because he didn't he did Evil Within, but then someone else was the game director for Evil Within 2, and he was the consultant.
Am I misremembering? But didn't he leave specifically to make Tango so that he could make Evil Within, which was a callback to the old Silent Hills and Resident Evils? Wasn't that the whole point of him leaving originally?
I think so, probably because he wasn't happy with where he was, so he's I can't really do the things I want to do. So you go do Tango, you create the spiritual successor to a franchise that you're known for and that you probably want to go back to. It's why people are so excited about that tactical espionage game that Kojima's going to make, going back to that after since 2015. But yeah, it's and he said, I think he didn't feel he was kind of and I'm paraphrasing here and saying it wasn't he was the Kojima of Tango. He said it was more he was kind of a regular rank and file employee. It wasn't just people think of Tango, they think of him at the time. But he said it didn't really feel that way when he was there. So it was more now I'm not saying whether or not that was positive or negative for him, but it was there's an interview with IGN. If I can find it here, it's he's at, let's see, has connections. Okay, blah, blah, as far as why he couldn't do this at Tango. I'm saying, okay, blah, blah. He became closer to a rank and file employee than someone with influence after ZeniMax Media acquired Tango just 7 months after it was founded. I had only been CEO for 6 months. I think a lot of people were under the impression that I was the representative. I was very close to a rank and file employee. I had producer attached to my name, but I wasn't an executive or anything of that sort. So it sounds like when he found it and then ZeniMax got it, it's okay, he kind of lost that.
So maybe that's why he left, is because he wanted that back.
But I'm curious then, why, if ZeniMax acquired you, you had to be part of this conversation. It's was it I need to do this because in order to keep my employees afloat, it'd be beneficial to join ZeniMax, or what I mean? Or did he think it would be different? A lot of people go back to that because the Microsoft thing, they've been linking a particular video from the documentary that did the oh my God, what's the name of that documentary? Ben Hansen always talks about it he was talking about every podcast forever on MinMax. But the Psychonauts, the Psych Odyssey, whatever documentary. And there's like a clip in there of, I think it's a Matt Booty at Double Fine being like talking about, oh, we're not going to, our goal here is not come in here and rock the boat and yada, yada. And like moonlighting's still okay. We know some people got some things to do. The only time it's going to be issues if it directly competes with Microsoft. And then they talk about how like during pitch meetings, like which, studios have, when they pitch ideas at Double Fine, those ideas that employees had that don't get picked up, Double Fine doesn't own those ideas. Or traditionally it's like, if you come up with something at the studio you work for, they're going to own it, so that the way they can kind of do it in the future. But Double Fine's like, Tim Schafer's like, no, we're not going to do that way. Like if you want to make this game on your own, or you want to go start in the studio, you can. And then he's like, oh, we're going to have to essentially we're going to have to put a stop to that. He's like, oh, we already said that for a recent one. He's like, after they had acquired them, and he's like, okay, well, if you do any future ones, we're going to have to iron that out. But it was like just interesting, and the employees are like in the documentary. So just some interesting out there. So I'm curious if it was like something like that with ZeniMax, like, hey, you kind of gotta more do things this way, and he didn't have as much autonomy as he thought he would. So, but yeah,
God, what a shit show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's nuts, man. Like
all the quotes really are what make it for me. Of like all there are.
Mm-hmm.
I know you quoted the one, but there are so many that are like, yeah, we're not going to do this because we value this game.
Yeah, and like, oh, just because Redfall, had a trouble launch, and it's like it's not like, oh, you're out of the thing now, like you got to go. It's like,
yeah. So I knew Redfall, obviously, like Arcane Austin understood that they were a big game company, that they made a lot. What I didn't realize though was I didn't realize they were the lead on so many of the games. Like, I thought the first Dishonored was a joint venture between Austin and Arcane Leon, and I didn't realize that Arcane Austin was like the only one that did the first Dishonored.
Yep. Yeah.
Same thing with like Prey. I didn't realize that Arcane Austin was the only one that did Prey. So it was kind of like, wow, you really closed the people that made Prey and Dishonored.
Yeah. Now of course, Prey, people really love it now, but like it wasn't necessarily a big hit when it launched as well.
It didn't do great when it came out, which I understand was
but it wasn't a bad game.
Yeah, it was definitely still a good game.
Yeah.
But like people did love Dishonored when it first came out, and it's just kind of shocking to me that you can think of like, you make so many game hits, and you definitely like Arcane has a style. I think everyone would pretty much agree that the Dishonored games, Prey, they all have a certain feel to the games that you've kind of come to expect when you're playing like an Arcane game. And closing the studio that did that, it just feels really strange to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much like you put yourself in this position, and now you closed the studios that were doing interesting things. So like, what is your plan exactly? What are you just want to bank on like Call of Duty and shit like that? These studios did, like, I feel like, pretty iconic stuff. They did things that were new, they did things that were interesting, and they did things that were good. And one of your studios that you just closed supposedly was in the process of pitching a sequel to one of those things that I feel like is something we've talked about before, where it's like the initial game was good, maybe had some little things here and there, but the sequel is going to be fantastic. So like, what is the thought process other than some stupid ass management CEO piece of shit that's just like, I see numbers and nothing else. I don't know what you're doing over there, but I see that you spent a lot of money on this thing and these things aren't making that money back, so close those things.
I really liked the article that I mentioned earlier also touched on how Microsoft has screwed itself with Game Pass, because now with Game Pass you either have like Call of Duty, your big money maker, which you have to put on Game Pass day one, and then people don't buy it, or you don't put Call of Duty on Game Pass, which it's guaranteed to sell a ton because people love Call of Duty, and then people look at the value of Game Pass and say like, well, why the fuck is Call of Duty not on there? This is like the one game we would want on there.
Right.
Yeah, like you said, all your first party stuff would be on Game Pass day one, and then like that point system discussion they talked about in that one article or tweet from the former, I believe it was former Xbox Microsoft employee, basically saying like, yeah, it's like this the way it works. Like it's all based on how many people are playing the game at the time, and they split it's like ranked that way, and the revenue, I guess, from that month from Game Pass is then divvied up based on that player engagement. And it's like, yeah, it's so weird. Like, okay, you could do real well, but it's like if Game Pass isn't doing well, then that's not a ton of revenue. So,
God, I hate
It's
that
a
idea.
mess.
I just like I get why they closed it. They closed the studios because they weren't making money. That's always the reason. Like I understand that. But then like on the larger level, it just seems crazy to me that they would close so much of what they had purchased and worked for. And obviously like Tango is really the big one that's kind of confusing. Well, I guess Arcane also is. The third one didn't really, I can't even remember what the name of it was. So I guess that shows how much of an effect it had on me. But yeah, Arcane and Tango just like Arcane really couldn't take one misstep. They've released so many quality games, and the one misstep they had, which is kind of admitted, was because Microsoft interfered and made them make that type of game, and then you close them over it.
well, Microsoft didn't interfere. That was the issue, really. Like they were very hands off. When even Phil said like they should have been more hands on with Redfall from the get go.
Wasn't Microsoft the one that wanted them to make a looter shooter in the first place?
No, no, it wasn't. It was confusion over they talked about it changing scope with that game at the time, like early on, like, oh, we're going to do this. Okay, now let's make it like this. But no, that didn't come like from Phil coming down. But he definitely should have been more involved and scrutinized the way things were from the beginning instead of leaving them, do their own thing. Like there should have been more micromanaging, which he talked about in his kind of funny interview after that game came out. Because yeah, if you're gonna do a live service type game, anyways, it's like you should have that looked at. I mean, look at we're talking about with oh my god, like Marathon and people like that, or like the reports that Bungie looked at the Last of Us factions and like gave comments on it, and it's like, yeah, you're gonna have to scrutinize live services and not just kick out a live service. But yeah, it's rough, man. I'm curious if it would be different if Arcane Austin also did Dishonored 2 instead of that being Arcane Leon, because they need to have a little more under your belt. But
yeah, it's just it wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah, and it's that they talk about too, like it's that acquisition to Activision, like Microsoft let them spend $69 billion, and now it's like you're going to be scrutinized from Microsoft higher ups to be like, how are you going to make that money back? Like,
right?
You spent a ton of money. You spent $8 billion on Bethesda, and then 69 on this. Like, where's the money? And then yeah, it's just like, I don't know, man. I don't know. And I'm curious, like, if Game Pass had taken up, they talk about like Game Pass growth halting, and I'm like, well, probably because your platform isn't selling as well as the competitors, and yeah, like not everyone's going to want to subscribe to that for games. Like, oh, we're the Netflix for games. Like that's great, but it's not like Netflix took off immediately, and also Netflix started as a physical mailing company. Like your streaming services aren't like, if they had started as streaming back in the day, it's like, yeah, they're not going to take off because not everybody has the bandwidth to stream a movie and whatnot and this and that. It's like, now you're introducing this. Yeah, we get the concept, but you're introducing it to a market that didn't operate like that. And so it's like, I don't know how you could have possibly forecasted that, oh, we expect Game Pass to be huge. But
well, it's interesting because like they saw not the fall of Netflix, but we have proof right now of all of Netflix's struggles. Whereas when Netflix first came out, I don't know how much you could have really predicted the problems Netflix is having right now with when it first came out, the whole like discourse of it's turning into cable again, all of that. But with Game Pass, we have all that information. So like they must have, seen it was coming, right?
Well, I think it's more like, how do you, like, sure, you don't have those troubles because all you're doing is essentially they're not streaming it, they're downloading the games. It's like, okay.
Right.
But just the you overestimated how much of your player base would choose to pay for a game subscription versus owning product outright. And so it's like but they know you have to incentivize players by bringing. That's why they bought all these companies, is to put their game on Game Pass, because you want to make the product good. Having the games will push the subscriptions.
But I think like the fixed subscriber count. Like, you have a fixed number of people that are going to play this game at any one time. So you need to, you need to build your business model off of only a fixed number of people.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, and you had a couple years where like you hardly had anything as Xbox, studios for content. Like, yeah, you had some maybe third party exclusives, but there was a while there where you had a drought, just like Sony. But Sony's not pushing a streaming or a subscription platform like that. They have their streaming, sure, but they're not doing that Game Pass kind of thing. So it's like there's a while there you didn't have the content, which again goes on to the spending spree to get that content, and then that content doesn't come out fast enough. So like those couple years that you could have had some significant growth, even if it's like, okay, people come on for the month, play the game, and they drop, which still bad from a revenue perspective, but maybe you get the people you get who try the game at that cheaper price, whatever Game Pass was at the time, versus $60, $70. If the percentage of people you get is higher because it's cheaper, then maybe you can either break even or do slightly better. Versus like, hey, I'm not interested in this kind of game. It reviewed well, but I could spend $10 and I could try Game Pass and maybe try another game and then just do it for the month. And if enough people make that decision, but yeah, it's just like, I don't know. Yeah, it's tough, man. I think you shouldn't have had as many. Like Game Pass feels like maybe it could have worked if you had more, if you were making more AA and like indie titles, and it was like a cheaper indie platform. Like, because then you could pay the indies to get that game released on Game Pass, and then people could try them out and be like, oh, this is where you go. Game Pass, where you go to play the indie games. And it's like the indie developers are making money, and then you don't have to spike up the cost of Game Pass, and people can try out the indies there. It's just like a smaller revenue stream, and not put AAA games on there.
Game Pass clearly works. I think the suggestion I saw that made the most sense was just like, yeah, you just should have had a delay to it. You should have said it's not day one, it's after a month or something like that. Kind of how the PlayStation model works, because otherwise you cannibalize your purchase base.
Yeah, but then it's like, I'm wondering then how many people do you do the wait thing? Like, obviously you have people who don't want to miss out on if it's the big new hotness, you don't want to, like, oh, I got to be in the conversation. You have those kind of people, but then you have other folks like, yeah, whatever, I'll just wait. But yeah, it's like, what if you did that? What if it was just launched normal? And then, yeah, a month later you can get it on Game Pass.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't have sold as much and it wouldn't be as popular, but it also probably would be more sustainable then.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't make quite as much, but you have a sustainable model that doesn't require you to close.
Yeah, I wonder how much they're looking at, like, for Starfield, and especially.
Okay.
It's like,
so sorry, you reminded me of the other thing I wanted to talk about. So, I guess we don't know the full reasons why these studios were closed, but presumably they were closed because they weren't making enough money and their games disappointed. And then they just purchased Bethesda. And it's just like, it's impossible for me not to be like, well, fuck, Starfield disappointed everyone. Like, What are you going to do? Are you going to lay off all of Bethesda that you just purchased? Because Starfield certainly, like, I know that, like, Arcane was under Bethesda and that was part of the whole thing, but Arcane was under Bethesda and that was part of the whole reason Arcane closed. But all of Bethesda worked on Starfield and it did not do well.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be like, I guess because they have such a bigger track record and they have.
Do they though? Do they really have that much of a bigger track record than Arcane?
Well, I mean, they got like all the Elder Scrolls do well, all the Fallouts do. Even if Fallout 4 didn't, was everybody says that kind of like a Fallout 3.5, and then just still buggy. Like they're still like big games. So, well, yeah, it kind of didn't review well. It still had a lot of players.
But I mean, their last two big releases were Starfield and Fallout 76, and neither one did great.
Fallout 76 wasn't Todd Howard proper. That Fallout 76 was handled by Who
Yeah,
did
but it was
It was
might
still
not have been
Bethesda,
Todd Howard.
though.
Yeah,
Right.
it was still Bethesda, even if it wasn't Todd Howard.
It
Yeah,
has
yeah.
to be like name recognition. Like whoever's making this decision is like, oh, I know Bethesda because it's talked about a lot and it was this big acquisition and it was high profile and it's in the news. But these other studios, I've never heard of them. Like, why does Bethesda get the pass to like quote unquote try new things or have rocky starts or bad launches or bad games, but these other smaller studios, they get the axe like completely. They don't get like staff cuts or warnings or anything like that. They just get completely closed. No chance to like buy out, no chance to go independent or anything like that. That's just like you don't exist anymore.
And I would say Starfield's fuck up was way larger than some of these other ones because Starfield surely cost more money than a lot of I don't understand why Tango was closed to begin with, considering Hi-Fi Rush actually reviewed very well. But there's no way that Starfield, like the fuck up of Starfield, cost less money, right?
True.
Yeah, but yeah, and I think like because they purchased them in 2021, and 76 came out in 2018, so it wasn't like it came out under Microsoft's leadership as well. Even though they obviously know about how it's doing, but I guess it's just maybe they have more money in the bank, I suppose. Because obviously they must have had some stuff prior to from ZeniMax and prior to Xbox, acquiring them, so maybe they could afford some of that loss. It's like, okay, whatever, this and that.
It's
like,
very,
I don't know.
It feels very like, hey, I know our last two projects were bad. They may have sold a lot, but they had a lot of bad press and they had a lot of bad things about them. But hey, our next thing, Elder Scrolls 6, that's going to do it. That's going to be like. And so you look at it and be like, okay, I see your track record of people really like the stuff that you put out. So yeah, sure, your next thing is going to be great. But that's still like, okay, but the studios that had very good releases and very good reviews and very good press, why did you close those?
Yeah. It's like, cause like, it's not like Tango had bad press for any of their stuff. It's like, they're just gone, which again, I'm wondering how much that comes down to Mikami leaving. Like, did they value him more than the studio? Cause they're always like, we want a Japanese studio.
It has to be, right? Because what if
That's the only thing I can
repute
think
that
of.
they were in the process of pitching Hi-Fi Rush 2? Like, okay, you're pitching a sequel to this game that was really, really well received, but the person that we bought the studio for isn't there anymore. So how good is it going to be, really?
And people talk about it too, like, well, okay, so they quickly kick it out to PlayStation, hoping they can get some more money out of it, and like, oh, it does okay. It's like, and then like, okay, now we'll close them. Like, I'm like, would have been different if it was huge on PlayStation. Like, hypothetically, like would have been, I don't know how much it cost. If it was a normal price game or not, but it's like, would that have made any difference? But yeah. I just feel like how much of this can be put on Game Pass? But then it's like, okay, if Game Pass wasn't a thing, would they have acquired Bethesda and Activision? Like, I obviously say they did it for King, but like they'll still want to put that stuff on Game Pass to help it get sold. But yeah, it's like, if Game Pass wasn't a thing, where would they be? But
it's
who knows?
Absolutely infuriating.
And I love how they had like Sarah Bond on that talk with Forbes, I think. And someone asked a question like, why did you close them after the big game? And then she's like, just word salads the answer, and then the camera zooms out and you see like the chart for like how well Xbox Game Studio is doing. It's like you see the giant, it's like growth or whatever, and like a big old chart. It's like, well, that growth is clearly from acquisitions. It's not like from natural growth. But you see it's also dropping down. You're like, there it is, there it is. Line go down. But
another like example. This person doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about. Honestly, they don't know what the fuck is going on. All they know is they were part of a decision to close the things, and now they're being interviewed about why, and they're just like, well, what do you mean why? It's because money number small.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, gotta make
trying to be corporate about it or whatever and pretend like they know what the fuck they're talking about.
Yeah, and even I like the
money number small.
Tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean that's one way to put it.
Yep. And even like the Arcade Leon head there was like upset about it on Twitter, just like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, it's, I don't know, man, just a ton of layoffs this year. Like, because they even laid off like 1,900 people at Activision Blizzard, like at the start of the year. Sony laid off 900.
Which is, the
1,000,
Activision thing is funny because they were like, yeah, we're not going to lay off studios, and that was part of the whole FTC ruling on the acquisition, is that they wouldn't lay off everybody. But it's like, yeah, well, that was a lie.
Yeah,
Yeah, no shit.
they yeah, and it's just like, and the people that like moved had to, like, when they did it after they forced the return to office too. It's just like, it's so fucked up. Like, people had to then move out to Cali, and then, oh, hey, 2 months later you're fired.
Why?
It's like, what the fuck?
The thing that gets me is like, why are they allowed to get away with this shit? It's
Money.
so
Money number high.
Yeah,
but I feel like there's no, I don't know if,
because there's
I
no
want to
unions.
say that if any other like industry pulled this kind of shit, it would be totally different. But I feel like just because maybe the backlash is so small, like they're not reporting on this on like CNN and shit like that. You know what I mean? But if Exxon did something similar, it would be all over all the mainstream media and stuff like that. But I feel like they would still fucking get away with it.
Yeah, I am curious what the I'm blanking on the name of it, but what the like package is like when you get let go.
Like a severance or
Yeah, how, like, is it 6 months pay to help cover like how much? Because I know like that's kind of like how it was for people that got let go from the place where I worked, a couple of years back when they had to get rid of some folks, and it's like the one guy's like, he's like, oh, I got a lot of money in the severance package, so he was like, he was bummed, but he's like, I'll be covered for a bit. So I'm curious what it is for those big companies. Like, yes, like, is it applied to everybody? Is it based on job position? Like, I'm curious, in tenure, or how long you've been at the company? Like, I'm curious. I know part of it, well, at least for our company, like the severance package is also based on how long you've been with the company. So I'm curious, like, what it is like for someone who's been there for a year, who's working one of the, I guess, I don't know what an entry level position for a game studio is, but like, yeah, how much assistance do they get? Because it's not like a standard in the US or other countries. I believe it's like, it's pretty standard, but
it can't be like substantial.
I don't know. I read about what Germany gets for assistance, and it was like,
yeah.
You think what?
I was gonna say, I think I was referring to the US, but how much is Germany?
Oh, Germany assistance was like, you get 3 months salary, you get healthcare for the next year, you get free training to like pursue your next job. It was like insane. It's way more than what we get.
Yeah.
And a lot of it too comes down to, the size of the US in general. That's why it's like always the states that are like have those laws, those labor laws. There's like California's always trying to watch out for, like, cause I think, we talked about I don't know if we talked about it, but like the FTC, where it's like, hey, anti-compete is going to go away. Like, it's a ridiculous rule for companies to have. But in California, I don't think anti-compete clauses apply, if I'm correct. And I was reading it, but such a dumb rule. But it's like, yeah, you got to be in a state where like they have like good labor laws. But
there was a really prominent non-compete thing here where a surgeon left one hospital and went to another hospital, and they had non-competes as the surgeons, and the hospital sued him for like $10 million or something, and won.
What?
Yeah, it's so non-competes is so dumb.
Yeah,
like,
and they won.
Yeah, if it's in your clause and it's like you signed it, it's like, yeah, it's an agreement. It's like it's so dumb.
There's a shortage of healthcare workers and surgeons. Let's make it harder to be a healthcare worker and surgeon.
Yeah. It's such a fucked up concept.
Because like, oh well, we don't want people to poach our workers with better wages and benefits. So we're gonna put a non-compete in there. You got to wait 6 months, or you
literally what it is.
Exactly. Yeah, and you can work for them, but it has to be in an entirely different position, which is usually what happens when people leave. It's always like, oh, I'll go work for a competitor, but I just won't do the job I was doing. I'll do a different job, but you still have all the insider knowledge. But anyway,
insert fart noises here.
Yeah, I don't have any fart noises.
How did we get to non-competes from Microsoft?
Imagine if Microsoft had a non-compete. Oh my god. Burn it down.
I bet they do.
Oh, burn it down.
The other thing I'm wondering with
I'm sure
all of this
does.
bullshit is like how many of these people are just going to end up going back to Sony and or like other major studios, and it's just going to be like, well, what was the point of the purchase anyways?
I don't know, man. If we were in a healthier position, like if the industry as a whole was healthy and then Microsoft was just having financial troubles with Game Pass, I feel like, yeah, then we can see some of those jobs being absorbed into other places, which is what we've seen in the past. Like, hey, we're hiring. But Sony let off a bunch of people as well. So unless like, and I know some people post like when this happens, you say, hey, you know, New Moon Studios is hiring, or, you know, we're hiring over here. You do see some of that, but it can't be like what it used to be back in the day where it was like when the industry was still growing, where now it seems like it's contracting a bit. So that's, and it's like sports teams, right? It's like, oh, you got traded to another company or another team. Now you got to go move to that state and then go there for a bit. Oh, you got to move again. It's like, I'd hate to be like, oh, get excited, move someplace. And it's like, oh, now you got to move somewhere else. And it's like, okay, the move's on you. You don't get any assistance there. So it's like, it's just, I think that's why remote is the way to go. But
yeah, the reason it shocks me is just though it's like you had some really talented people. Like surely you're going to try to poach or grab some of them, right? Like you can't just. I guess you could let them all just not, you know, let that talent go to waste. But whether you like the games or whether they sold well or not, there are probably some extraordinarily talented programmers and designers in those studios. And like you have to imagine that they're going to get hired by someone.
Yeah, I wonder what Harvey Smith was he still at Tango? Yeah, because he was a studio director for Redfall, and so now they just close it. What does he do? And I wonder where he's going to go. Like he did, like he's Deus Ex, right? System Shock. Like we worked on a bunch of this stuff back in the day. So I'm curious where he's going to go. I feel like that's a pretty big, because he was creative director, designer, and writer on Dishonored, creative director on Dishonored 2. Same for Death of the Outsider. But yeah, it's just like I'm curious cause that's like one of those video game industry names. I'm curious what'll happen with Harvey Smith.
So like I know you don't have to hire all the new people. Like I get that, you know, no one is entitled to a job. It just seems crazy to me that you know you would lose so many people. Yeah,
like with the one Roundhouse absorbing them into Elder Scrolls Online seems like okay, at least they're just like, because they're kind of like a support studio anyways. It's like, okay, you absorb them to them. There you go. That's not too bad. It's just like, okay. But unless you have to like move to wherever that place is, then I'm like, okay, well, that could be tough. It's like, what's housing like in this location? How much more is it? Yada, yada.
And of course they get like no stipends or stipends.
Exactly. No assistance to move.
No help whatsoever.
Yep. Yeah. Cause I asked a buddy of mine who had a move cross country. Like, did they help you with that? Like when they hired you to go over there? Like, nah. And I'm like, okay. So they just reached out to you saying like, hey, we could really use your help on this position over here, but you got to move cross country. It's like, all right, with your family. It's like, okay.
It's unfortunately kind of how it is.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, no incentives and benefits for the employees. But anyway. Yeah, we'll see. I'm really curious how that conversation is going to go in June after the showcase. I'm curious what the mood of the showcase is going to be like. If it's a pre-recorded thing, are they going to address it in the showcase, or are they only going to address it in the IGN interview with Ryan McCaffrey and Damon Hatfield with Phil Spencer after the fact? Like, I'm really interested in how they're going to have that conversation and how much because I know McCaffrey will grill Phil on a Game Pass and studio closures. Like he wrote an article for IGN the other day that was talked about where he talked to a bunch of Microsoft people behind the scenes, or a couple Microsoft folks about it, and how it seems like it's less Xbox game studios and more Microsoft game studios now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking of how that conversation would go. Hey, so you know how you talked about how you would not do this? Well, that was a lie.
Yeah. And you sit here. Yeah. And Phil's going to have to, say something, but it's like they'll have time to prep their corporate response, whatever, versus like Sarah Bond's word salad.
The lie detector test determined that was a lie.
Yeah. Yeah. You said you'd do this, but then this happened. But anyway.
It's going to be awkward.
Yep. But it'll be fun to watch. So that's pretty much it for the news. We'll go and jump on what we've been playing. So the first game from Big Mode, I believe, came out, Animal Well, indie game. It's been reviewing very well. And Isli, you've been playing it.
Yes.
You beat it as well,
I
right?
did beat it. Yes, I beat the hell out of it.
How
I
long
no
do you
life
think it
that
was?
game. Okay, so this is one of those challenging questions. I feel like I'm pretty good at puzzle games, so there weren't really any
Brag
puzzles
about
in
it.
Animal Well that. Well, I don't think
I'm
Animal
kidding. I'm
Well
kidding.
is super hard.
I said the same thing with Viewfinder. It's okay.
Yeah, like I don't think Animal Well is a super hard game. I think I beat the main story probably in. Actually, I can look at my time. I
Yeah.
beat the main story in 7 hours.
Okay, yeah, good length.
And in that time that I beat the main story, I got 50% of the collectibles in the game. So kind of trying to keep it vague for like, enjoyment, but I got 50% of the collectibles, beat the story, and then the post game grind of whether you want to get 100% of the collectibles is where I'm at right now. And I've heard you can spend a lot more time on that. I really enjoyed it. It is a Metroidvania that doesn't have combat, so it's a puzzle-based Metroidvania. It kind of reminds me of, God, I don't even know how to describe the like platforming. The platforming is pretty simple, but the joy of the game is really just the atmosphere is really good. The sound effects and sound design are really good. The rumble effects on the controller are really good. So, what are you giggling about?
It just sounds so funny because when I'm just thinking about when like the DualSense came on, Sony talked about like the rumble in the controller like as a feature, and everybody kind of poo-pooed it. But then when games come out that actually use, especially like Astro's Playroom,
Oh yeah,
and people are
Astro's
like,
Playroom was
man,
really good with it.
the
Like
rumble
that.
is really good, or like I really like it. It's funny when people talk positively about a feature that they usually pay no mind to because normally devs don't put any effort into it.
Well, yeah, it's like you know, if you're not paying, you don't notice
Yeah,
it
yeah,
until
yeah,
you notice it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
when you're playing a normal game, you're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. But when you're playing a game that executes it well and you actually pay attention, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I actually see what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the atmosphere in the game is incredible. I know there was a lot of like, go into it blind, and I definitely do recommend going into this game blind just for like maximum enjoyment. Though I think I would recommend that for like a lot of games in general. Um, I I don't think there were any things like I think you can talk pretty freely about the game without spoiling it. You don't The story is minimal. It's kind of like a Souls-esque story where you're kind of dropped into the world and you have to figure shit out for yourself, and you kind of make the story up as you go. It's really just all about the atmosphere. In terms of the actual Metroidvania gameplay, I loved it. So all of the items and all of the exploration is really unique and different than what I'm used to in a Metroidvania. So they took all of the main concepts of a Metroidvania, but then they put a spin on everything that you would usually get. So like one kind of like minimal spoiler, they have like a really creative take on how you do a double jump, um, which I won't spoil that. I'll just say they have a unique take on how you actually get that ability and what that ability actually means and entails. And they've done that for pretty much every type of typical like navigation or exploration tool Metroidvanias usually have. So I loved it. I thought it was a pretty easy game. There weren't really any like rooms or areas that confused me. I'm surprised by all of the comments that I've seen that are like, this game's really hard. They just kind of strike me as like, have you ever played a puzzle game before in your life? Like,
Probably not. No.
yeah, like none of the platforming is like the Celeste like C roll levels of platforming.
Can't
It's
get
all like,
past the tutorial of that one Xbox game.
yeah, like none of the platforming is crazy. It's all pretty simple, and all of the puzzles are usually solved by like usually one tool. I can't think of any one that was there. There's like one or two puzzles that are solved with like a combination of two tools, but usually like every platform is solved by one item you get, or can be solved in multiple ways, or the items or abilities you get allow you to not really break the game, but like there are some pretty cheesy things you can do with a lot of the items. So all the people that are like, this is so hard, I'm like, really? Like you've got like three different items, all which can solve this puzzle all on its own, and you can't figure out any one of those three to use to solve this puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
So highly recommends. Definitely do recommend going in blind, but it is just a standard Metroidvania of, you explore the world, find power-ups, you get new abilities in order to navigate more of the world, and then you beat the game. But the enjoyment is just going in blind, enjoying the atmosphere. I don't know if I would even watch it ahead of time, because I think some of the coolest moments from the game are really like walking in rooms and just not knowing what's up ahead. So yeah, I loved it. High reviews, really good Metroidvania. It's on one of the PS tiers for free, not the low
Yeah,
one.
PS
One of the
Extra.
yeah, worth purchasing as well though. I think it's on sale right now. Yeah, you should play too, so we can talk about it.
Yeah, I downloaded it, but I think it's because it's part of PS Extra.
Yeah,
I think I did. The store was having like a problem the other day. Where I was like, oh, add to library, and it's like it just got hung up, and like because I know like Destiny Lightfall's on there. I was like, oh well, I better add it to my library because I have some of the other expansions, and I just in case I ever go back to Destiny for some reason, I'm like, at least I'll have all this content. But well, unless they vault it, but
yeah, unless Destiny eliminates it, which they do. So
I'll probably play it after I finish Lies B, but I have it on my list to check out.
I just bought it for Switch, so
oh nice. There you go.
Oh god, I really hope you're not playing the game and you're like, this is really hard. I'm just gonna be like, ooh.
Well, no, the thing about Metroidvania that I usually have problems with is like handling the combat as well as remembering like where to go kind of things. But I think like a Metroidvania that's more puzzle based would stick better in my mind about where things are, because it's like, okay, well, I remember the room where I had to do this specific puzzle, whereas like something like Metroid is just like, okay, I remember the room, but I don't know where it is because I was kind of just running through killing everything.
Yeah. So something I can say without spoilers here as well is something Animal Well does really, really well, but you should definitely experience on your own, is all of the typical gripes I usually have with Metroidvanias, they have solved. Now, part of the vagueness of this is like they solve a lot of stuff in really creative ways, so part of the joy is figuring out how they solved it. But like a lot of the annoyances that Metroidvanias typically have, they have figured out a solution to that's really nice. And I think that's one of the reasons it's getting so much praise, is it's just really, really well designed.
Yeah. Yep. And it's good to see, because I know a lot of people were like, oh, big mode, like, which is such a weird take. Like, I don't know I mean, I'm not like a huge like Donkey stan or anything. Like, I like some of his movies, like some of his videos, but it's like, it was weird to see people kind of bash on his announcement of big mode back in the day.
Which is so stupid. Like, if there's one person that I trust to find a good indie video game, it's probably Donkey.
Someone who reviews indie video games and makes videos and makes his living off of ripping them apart and or giving them good reviews. Yeah, seems like he should know his shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just weird. But anyway, yeah, good to see. I'm curious what else they have in the hopper. I don't know if I haven't like keeping track, so I don't know if like Big Mode's announced like if they had a showcase, if they had like been part of any sort of indie showcase in the past. Like, oh, here's Animal Well, here's a couple of things, yada yada. But I'll be curious to see.
I wasn't tracking any of their stuff and had no idea this game came out until you actually commented on it, and then I looked it up. Was like, oh, it's free. I love Metroidvanias. It's getting really good reviews. I'm looking for a game to play. It was kind of a perfect storm of, well, why the fuck wouldn't I download it immediately?
I want to see Animal Well Game Pass. But there's no Xbox, right? Okay, that explains it. I was gonna say, like, this is like, it's on PS Plus Extra, which isn't part of the base PS tier, but it's like, okay, it seems like a good, hey, we'll pay you to get this on here. It's a tiny game. So like, oh, this seems like it'd be great, going back to the indie conversation, Game Pass, but it's not even on Xbox. So I'm assuming it'll be on Game Pass once it comes out on Xbox. But anyway.
Yeah, highly recommend. Really fun, really enjoyed. If you like Metroidvanias, honestly, pretty much at all, I think it's definitely worth playing. So yeah, a fun game.
So were you playing anything else? I was trying to go back and look in Discord. Or do you have like what you're going to do next?
Yeah, I was playing Signalis as well at the same time. Right. And then I also did download Hi-Fi Rush. I haven't started Hi-Fi Rush, and I've made minimal progress in Signalis because I honestly got so wrapped up into Animal Well that I just wanted to play the hell out of Animal Well and beat it. Like, it engrossed me so much, I pretty much dropped the other games I was playing and no-lifed Animal Well.
Yeah, because
But
I have him. I think right now on. I thought on Steam. Or do I have it in my cart? Is that why? Oh yeah, Signalis is 30% off on Steam. So I was like, oh, I'll wait till and I think that discount lasts until I think the end of May. I like how they put like how long, yeah, and May 20th. So I was like, okay, I'll wait till Isli finishes. I mean, obviously the game's like overwhelmingly positive on Steam with 15,000 reviews.
Yeah.
And it's like got great stuff. So I'm like, I'll probably end up getting it, but I was like, I'll wait till I finish Liza P, and then probably play Animal Well, and maybe play some smaller games. But you think I'm gonna get back to Signalis or?
oh yeah, I was enjoying Signalis. I just, you know, you play some of those games sometimes where you toss one in and it really just clicks immediately, and that's what Animal Well did for me. So I don't think I'm going to get all of the collectibles. I'll probably spend some time playing around in the world trying to find some on my own, and then depending on I found 50% of them, so like depending on how easy or hard it is to find the rest of them, I might either decide to look up a guide for the remaining ones and see how much of a pain in the ass it's going to be to get the platinum,
Yeah.
or I'll just say, you know, this is fine. I don't need the platinum. So a bit more, and then back to Signalis.
I don't need the platinum.
Yeah, we'll see how close I get.
Yeah. What about you, Zaya? What have you? I saw you in Honky Star Rail.
Honky Rail.
Yeah, I was thinking of the others. Like, man, that's like prime for someone to like an artist to do fan art, but make it like Honky Star Rail, like a southern version of characters, like just in some weird. I don't know where I'm going with that. I just thought it'd be funny.
Absolutely love like a Cowboy Bebop style rendering or imagining of Honkai Star Rail.
Everybody puts a staring in a cowboy hat with aviators. Like, give me some cowboy characters, but for Honkai Star Rail.
I know, right?
Really funny. Like, but anyway.
But no, that's pretty much all I've been playing lately. The 2.2 update came out recently this week, and I didn't really realize how far behind on main content I was until I went to go do some of that content, and I was like, oh, I'm a little bit behind because I got sidetracked with all of the side stuff that was in 2.1. So I kind of finished up that stuff and then started working my way towards that. I did waste a lot of time trying to get my fucking 8-bit Do controller to work on my tablet. For some reason, half of the buttons just don't work when I connect it to Bluetooth, and when I connect it wired, because it's a Nintendo style controller, it doesn't coincide with the buttons that are on screen because they're like Xbox buttons. But for some reason, when I play with my Hori Switch controller on PC, it's the correct button. I don't know how to explain this. It's like it's the correct button on the controller, even though it's showing like Xbox controls and Xbox icons and stuff like that. But if it says push X, it's the actual like X button on my controller and not where the X button would be on an Xbox controller.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like flipped for some reason when I connect it wired to my tablet. So it's just fucking confusing me as far as like which button is which. So I wasted a lot of time trying to figure that out the other day. So I decided I'm just going to play it on PC and enjoy my high frame rate. And if I play it on my tablet or on my phone, it's just going to be for the grinding stuff because I'm over it. But that's pretty much all I've really been playing. Playing a little bit of like on my little my retro emulator thing, just playing little things here and then. Mostly playing Bloody Roar. I really wish that it had GameCube games on it too, because I want to play Bloody Roar Primal Fury, but I guess I could just hook my GameCube up into the TV in the other room and play that. But
that requires work.
That requires
what is
work.
Bloody Roar?
You know Bloody Roar?
No. What is it?
It's a fighting game where you turn into aminals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, really good and fun.
Roar. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea how I haven't, but I have not.
Oh my god, I was obsessed with that game. I played it so much that I could clear the arcade stages on the highest difficulty in like 10 minutes, if that.
That's a skill.
Yeah. I used to be so good at that game.
Yeah, I've only ever played Bloody Roar 2 on the PlayStation back in the day, but I didn't own it. Like someone else had it.
Yeah, that's the one I've been playing on my little emulator one, and that's the one that I originally played because my friend had it, and then when I got my GameCube, I got the Primal Fury, so of course that was the one that I played the most. But
Yeah,
I missed that game. I wish they would make a new one. It would be so cool. Oh my god, it would be so cool.
yeah. Because I'm looking at the release. 2004 was or 2003 was the last. Was when Bloody Roar 4 came out. The final game in the series. Yeah.
Bummer. So good.
Hudson Soft publisher.
Doesn't get the
And the
love.
developer, Hudson Soft.
Doesn't get the love that it deserves. It got overshadowed by Tekken and Street Fighter and all of that. If they had Bloody Roar at Evo, oh my god, I would probably be actually going to Evo.
Do like a retro fighting category or something like that?
Yeah.
Air Guys do some crazy ass games. Except they got to do the thing where you do all the mini games in Air Guys. They do the dungeon. They don't actually do any of the actual fighting.
The actual like difficulty of that game is being able to play it at all, not necessarily winning a match, but being able to pull off a combo.
Yeah. God damn. Man,
you win the tournament if you can pull off one string combo.
You play as Zach in that game, right? I know
I don't remember if Zach was in it. I know Sephiroth and Cloud were, and I think Tifa. I don't remember if Zach was. Or if he was like an alternate costume to Cloud, maybe?
I almost remembered how to spell it. Your guys' player list. Characters. Yeah, because that doesn't help me. Yeah, I know Cloud, he's front and center on the cover, but I thought... Zach's in it. Yeah, it's got Cloud, Tifa, Sephiroth, Vincent, Yuffie, and Zach.
Oh my god, Zach, I don't even remember Vincent in it.
Zach, was an unlockable, I believe. I think you had to beat as Cloud.
Well, that would explain it. We could never beat that fucking game.
Yeah, and Yuffie, it doesn't say in this article. It's so old. This Square Wiki has nothing on it. But I do remember playing as Zach. But that game's so weird. Such a weird fucking game.
That was definitely for the 12-year-old girls who really, really liked Final Fantasy VII.
There's an arcade version.
You could do the side, the mini games as shirtless Sephiroth. So that's what we did.
Yeah, quest mode was like it's such a weird game. It's like it reminds me of when the Mortal Kombat. I forget which one. It might have been Deception. One of them had like an overworld with like a whole like story where you ran around. I think it was like Liu Kang or something. It was so weird. But I'm like, that's like what Ear Guys was like. Why did you have a dungeon crawler action RPG thing in your fighting game? Like, it's so weird. But anyway,
miss the hell out of the era of games where they were just weird. Games were just weird back then, and it was so good. More weird games, please.
Weird ass fucking game. God bless the king. Easy, Ear Guys.
Oh my god.
Okay, but like the bouncers, weird ass game. But anyway, I've been playing Lies of P. Really enjoying it. Great game. It's so Bloodborne. Like people say Bloodborne 2, I'm like, now that I've progressed further in the story, I'm like, this shit is so Bloodborne.
Very Bloodborne coded.
Well, yeah, it's just like so much of the mechanics, like it's just like 1-to-1, like, let me copy your homework, but don't make it too obvious. But it's like, nah, this is obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously it doesn't have multiplayer, so like that's the one thing. I'm curious how many other Souls-likes do like player messages. Like that's the one thing, like, in Souls games, it's like, oh, you got the player messages, like, try finger butthole, treasure ahead on the edge of a cliff, shit like that. But like, and the ghosts to see like how players died. Like, I feel like that's the one thing that must be like a tech patent maybe that they have. I don't know. Kind of like the Shadow Earth Shadow Mordor games, Middle Earth, Nemesis system.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It's like, because games do so much of the Souls stuff, but no one does the multiplayer component of it. I feel like I know games have multiplayer, like Neo has multiplayer, but I don't recall messages or bloodstains being a component of. I didn't play them, so that's why I'm not sure. But people usually, it's like the combat and mechanics, but it's like that's the one mechanic that doesn't go over. So, because I thought maybe Liza P did, because like you can, there's these like items you get to like help you summon a specter to fight, and in my mind I thought like, oh, that's summoning another player. But now it's like, how would that make sense in the world? And not necessarily that it makes sense perfectly in the Souls games either, but it's like it just isn't there. So yeah, it's weird, but like so much of it is like the world feels like Bloodborne. The way the story progresses, like it very much feels like Bloodborne. But yeah, it's really good. I really like it. They do some interesting stuff too. I like where, like, you know, when you die, you drop your ergo, which is like your souls, just like the Souls games. But if you die again on your way to get your ergo, you just drop it where you died in the new position, but you just lose some of what you had as your total. It's like I had like I was running around last night and I had like 30-something thousand, and I died and like, all right, let's go run back. But I didn't like the shortcut directly where I needed to be, so I was like, I got to kind of run through the first shortcut I unlocked, and then I died on the way back because I was rushing through. And it's like, oh, instead of that, now you only got like 20-something thousand available. But the souls are where I died in the new spot, not the old spot. And the enemies don't absorb it like in the Souls game, so I don't have to kill like the specific enemy that killed me. It's just they're on the ground.
So you don't like lose your original thing completely. You get it back, but it's just less.
Yeah, you get less. And there's like, because there's perks and stuff you can unlock, like, oh, you don't lose as many souls, or like items that reduce how much you lose or whatever. And I've never used them. I'm like, why would I use this? And then I'm like, oh, because they have that run back. Now you can be like, use the item just in case it's a difficult spot for the player and they don't make it. Or like you cheese it. You're like, oh, it's super far. I'll just pop this item and then just go die by this enemy right in front of me. And now my souls are there. And then I'll warp back and level up or something. I'm like, okay, that's an interesting way to do it. So I like that's because I didn't know that was a thing, because I've never died and not made it back. So I didn't know that was a mechanic. Like, they don't teach it to you. So I'm like, if I hadn't died last night and then died again, would have never known the entire game. So that was interesting. But I had a weird experience where, so it's like, you know, I play the game all the way up to this point, and I get to this boss, which is like, I guess, pretty hard. Like, and that's the thing, I don't know which bosses have been tweaked since launch.
Pretty hard.
Well, I think because like historically, like when I watched NL, it took him like 4 hours I didn't watch his entire play, like 4 hours to beat a boss. But like, and he said like his wife had trouble with it as well, because she played the game. She's also a streamer. But like I think it's like a pretty standard difficult boss for people. But anyways, I get to this boss, and they have like, you know, the items you get, these items to summon a specter. And I thought like, oh, it's not multiplayer, so I'm curious how the specter works, because there's also a dude you meet earlier on where he gives you like this thing called like a wish stone, and interesting lore mechanic behind it. But like, part of the wish stone that you can add to it is like stuff that augments the specter. And I'm like, huh, that's interesting. So like, I'm curious, like, how strong is this specter? So I was like, I did this boss fight, and pretty tough. I made it like to the second phase, but it's like, it was I don't spoil anything, but like it was tough going to that second phase. And then I was like, okay, I want to see how this specter works. So I summon in the specter. Specter just like makes the fight nothing. It's like I get through that first phase like it's nothing, and the specter like dies almost immediately in the second phase. I'm like, okay. So then I fight the second phase. I'm like, oh, well, this is gonna be kind of nice. I don't want to. At the time, I was tired. I'm like, you know what? I don't want to deal with the grind of having to. I can beat the first phase easily, but you know, you get in that Souls rut where like, you know, it's easy, but because you know it's easy, you're trying to rush through it, and then you screw yourself over a bit. And like, oh, I used more vials to get my HP back than I should have if I had just been patient. You know, yeah. So it screws you over in phase 2. And I'm like, all right, I'll use the specter. So I did the specter again. I was like, I'll get past phase 1 and let him die immediately in phase 2. But they didn't die. And so we beat the second phase, and I just felt like real bad. I was like, I didn't beat the boss normally. Like, and I've used like in Elden Ring, like I've used like summons for fights and stuff. And you know, they assist or whatever. And I've played that game in co-op, but it's like, it's a feature. And this is a feature in this game but it just didn't sit well with me. So like after I beat the boss, like I went and I did some more stuff. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll just can you go back and replay boss? Like, no, you have to do New Game Plus. So I was thinking about it, like, oh, maybe I'll just like do New Game Plus and just go straight to the boss. And like I went to the next area and got there and I went to bed. The next day I'm like, I was at work, I'm working, whatever. I'm like, I can't do that. So I'm like, I got to start over. And so I started over and just speed ran it.
The whole game?
Yeah.
Okay.
I started over and I just speed ran through the whole game.
How far into the game were you?
I was 16 hours in.
So like the guilt over not beating the boss yourself was so great. Okay.
Yep. I couldn't sit with it. I'm like, no, I have to beat this boss. Cause I for me, it's like a for me thing. Like I needed to do it. So
I get it. I've restarted Bethesda games because I screwed up on my build somewhere and lost one skill point. So I get it.
I even re-rolled, picked like they have you pick at the start, like, do you want balanced strength or this? And it's kind of like, do you want strength, dex, or a balance between the two? Now my first run I did balanced, and I like the sword they gave me. And then at the time I didn't really like the big swords, but they don't call it strength, dex, and agility or whatever like this. It's like motivity, technique, and advance. So when I did the first re-roll, I picked like the speed one or whatever. I'm like, oh, I don't like this weapon, but I was like, whatever, I just have to get to this boss. But then when I looked at the way it distributes your stats, because it's not just the weapon it gives you, it also makes your starting stats a certain way. And I'm like, I played like an hour. I'm like, oh, I don't like the way it did my stats, because you can't respec in the game until after you beat this boss and then the boss that's after it. So I'm like, I can't even respec before I get to this boss to make myself be like how I was before. So I played an hour, re-rolled again, and then I just took, bam, sped ran it. And like every boss I fought, I did the Spectre, and the Spectre just make, like, if you have struggle with Liza P, do the Spectre, because like the Spectre makes the bosses so trivial. Like the game was already, it's easy for a Souls game, and I don't know if that's because it's easy or because I played all the Souls games. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if my experience in them made it easier. Like, I'm not sure how to qualify that.
Like, you're just familiar with the mechanic.
Yeah, like, I mean, I had some bosses, like, again, it took me 16 hours to get where I was, where it only took me 5 to get back to the same spot. But that's also because I knew what was coming, and I knew exactly where to run. So I'm not exploring. I'm not making multiple attempts on the boss fights, learning their attacks. I knew all their attacks going in, and I took the Spectre with me. So it's like a lot of bosses I one-shot with the Spectre. But anyway, so where it took me like 16 hours, and it probably didn't take me 16 hours to get where I was. I did have somewhere like, maybe I got up and walked away for a half hour. The game was on pause. I don't think I went into rest mode at all in game. So, but probably like, 16 hours is where the game time says I was. So I get to the boss on my new run. I spec strength essentially. And because in my first run, I didn't put all my points into like good spots. So I also kind of knew like, okay, I should distribute my points this way in my levels when I level up. So it's like I was spec'd a little better. But then I went to the boss, beat it in 3 tries, and then I was like, okay, I feel good. And then I got exactly back to where I was in 5 hours and 45 minutes. So it's like, it was just like, I have to do this. And now I'm playing, and now I think I'm like 18 hours in. I'm in chapter 11, I think. And it's like, I'm further than I was. Like, I was on like, I think that point is like chapter 5, where I was at. Like, it's not really that long. Like, it's the way the levels are set up are interesting, because they're not long, and maybe they're not long in like Bloodborne either. It's just,
I mean, you can beat Souls games in like an hour. I don't think levels are long. I think the whole challenge of those games is when you're not familiar with it, you go super slow because you're like, oh my god, what's around this corner? Is this, some monster or horrible thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's evident with the fact that it took me, in those first 5 chapters, it was like 16 hours versus 5 hours. So it's like, a lot of that is, exploring, running around a corner. Oh, here's a new enemy type. How do I deal with it? Again, and learning the bosses. So, but yeah, so I did that, and now I'm much further along. I don't know how many chapters there are. I'm not sure. I didn't want to look it up to spoil myself on it, but yeah, so I did that. But yeah, really fun game. I like it a lot. I'm curious if there's like obviously Fadi didn't play it, and he only does like From games specifically. And I know there are people who.
Oh, he didn't play Liza P?
I don't know. I don't know necessarily if he didn't play it, but he didn't do like the story of like he does for like lore of Souls games. Like he's still doing more like he just did like an Armored Core lore video or something. But like he's not doing it. But I know there are people who do lore videos as well besides him. There's one person who I think is popular, but I don't really like the way they do theirs. They do too many like jokes, I think. I was like, I just give me the information. I don't want the jokes. But I'm curious to see like, because it's a lot like Sekiro, where it's like it's very straightforward. It reminds me a lot of like Sekiro as well, story wise. But yeah, definitely way more Bloodborne. But yeah, it's really good. I like it a lot. Some fun boss fights. I had one the other day It was fun. It was funny. I was in this one spot where it was like there wasn't a good shortcut to the boss, and so I'm like I'm running, and I have to drop down to like this pit area. And in the pit is a stairwell up towards the boss arena. But every time I drop into the pit, I never remembered which direction I had to go to get to the stairwell. And there's like a big enemy and a dog enemy in the area. And I'm like, is it over in this corner? Is it in this corner? And it's like, it's always just drop and then just turn around. And I never remembered each time I do that fight, like where it was. But yeah, there are some aspects of the story I'm really curious about where I'm like, okay, I need more information on this. Like I fought like a mini boss and it's like, this is interesting. I want to find out more about this enemy and how it links up to here. But yeah, there's some interesting stuff they're feeding, especially at the point where I'm at right now. I think I must be pretty close to the game because I can tell where I'm going. I know who I'm going to fight because I remember seeing NL fight this person. But yeah, I'm curious how much more I'll have after I get to the top of like the place I'm at.
And I think you said that this game is up there for you for favorite Souls games.
Oh yeah, this is like, it's up there. Like I like this probably more than the Dark Souls games. And that just comes down to not really caring about the aesthetics of medieval stuff.
Sure.
And this feels very more Bloodborne. I mean, it's like 1890s, probably like, Europe somewhere in the game, but
that more like Victorian kind of Gothic style.
Yeah, very more Bloodborne. And then the mechanics is it's that Sekiro mechanics of the blocking or deflecting, which I like a lot. There's a lot of all the mechanics built around that.
High praise.
Yeah, so I think it's really good. Now, if I'd played more Souls likes like Neo 2, and whatever other big Souls ones there are,
God, you're making me want to play it now.
Yeah, it's really good. I only picked it up because it was on sales. I think it's discounted for PS Plus. That's why I picked it up because I added it to my wish list.
I think the sale on it ended. I think I was looking earlier today, and I think the sale on it's over, which is kind of unfortunate because I was debating it and hesitated too long.
Yeah, I wish I could, like, I would love to like buy the disc and play like the 1.0 version just to see like the bosses that were more difficult. Because I forget. I'll have to go back and read the patch notes to see like, because I thought about doing that now, but I was like, no, I want to beat it, then go back and read the patch notes to figure out who did they tweak? Because then I could be from like, oh, this attack did this or this did that. I know they changed some things for like the weights of some items got tweaked down. I'm like, okay, well, that's a huge mechanic of the game is the weight of items. And it's interesting. What I like too, another change they made, which I talk about like with the dropping of echoes, how I like that change, is that weight doesn't make you fat roll. It just makes your stamina recharge slower. So it's like you can be as heavy as you want if you're carrying like too many weapons or whatever, you have heavy like gear, but you're not slower at rolling. It's just the recharge of the stam from rolling and blocking and attacking just takes longer to go up. So I thought that was an interesting change to the weight factor of a Souls game. But yeah, it's real good. I like it a lot. I'm curious to see where it goes, and then how it'll wrap up. I can't talk about any specifics, but a lot of fun boss fights in this that I like a lot. Had one that was like give me a lot of trouble, and because like the phase 2 was just like I was like, oh, I don't like this phase 2, this and that. So it's like, okay, now I got to get to that phase 1. The same thing happened. Like, okay, I know what to do, and then you just make a mistake because you're too impatient to get straight to that phase 2. But yeah, I actually like the weapon durability mechanic. It doesn't come into play a whole lot, but there are enemies that do certain status types that make your weapon degrade faster. So it's like having to actually repair my weapon in the middle of a fight is interesting. And I'm not used to that, it's funny. Like I'm not a big, like outside of like, Ludwig's sword in like Bloodborne, I'm usually not one for a big, slow, meaty weapon, but like when I re-rolled, I was like, since I'm going strength, like I have this one weapon I got from early on, I modified it, and I've just been running that bitch like it's level 10 to the end. And like I was curious like where it ranked as far as like weapons go, and I looked at it like, oh yeah, this is like it's like a really good weapon from like the beginning until you get like this weapon, like one of the boss soul weapons, and then it's like, but if you wanted, you could take it to the end. Like I tried even using some of those other weapons from the bosses, and it's like it's okay. But I love this weapon because like it staggers really well, and it's just like it's just chunky and it's just so fun to use. And I'm like, this is a fun weapon. But yeah, it's definitely very a fashion Souls game because the armor that you wear doesn't matter. It's just how do you want to look, and then they have a fun mechanic I like where there's like these encrypted little ciphers. You have to give this person back at like the home base, and they're like, oh, here you go. And it's like a picture, tells you to go somewhere, and you go to that location and you find, and it like usually leads you to find something like a treasure, this, that. Like there's one, like there's a part early on in the game where like there's a puppet like hanging from a bridge. It has like a sign on it. I forget what it says, but then later you find a picture. It's like, oh, throw something at the puppet. And then like you go back and now the puppet is, you can actually target it, and you can like throw an object, and then it drops a key. And then you take that key to another has a picture of a place, and you have to go find that place and then put the key in, and you find like a safe with some extra items in it. It's fun. But yeah, I'm curious how much more I have left to do it. But yeah, good game. Really enjoy it. I think you'd really like it, Isli.
Cool. Maybe I'll check it out next.
Does it have spiders in it?
So there's this one puppet enemy type that when I saw them, I'm like,
games have spiders.
I'm like, okay, Michael can play this one section where there's like it's a puppet lady, and she's got like a puppet spider body, but the legs are like ballerina legs. But I'm like, this is probably too spidery for Zaya. But it's only like 3 of them in this one section, and then you could also cheese this. It was funny. I saw like I think because I looked up what did I look up? I think because you know how YouTube goes, like you look up one video and YouTube's like, hey, check out all this stuff for the same subject. And one of them was like, oh, a skip for this section. And I watched it, and it's like, yeah, this dude just like skips over the entire place that has these puppets by like just running up, like you get up to the second store balcony, but as you run up, you just jump, and then you jump onto this railing, and then you just go on the other side and you go to where straight to the boss. I don't know if you can open up the door. I think you must be able to, because that's where the door is. So you can probably just turn around, open the door, versus getting there through exploring the buildings normal. But that's probably the only section. And again, if Michael could just beat it, I mean, they die quick, but Michael just kill them and then get to go. But yeah, it's fun. They do that thing where it's like early mini bosses show up later as like regular enemies. But then like, yeah, some of the changes they do too, like as the story progresses, is different. It was funny. Like, so you get like these things that like, you know, gear that increases your attack on certain enemy types. One is like, oh, you can increase your attack on puppets. Oh, you can increase your attack on carcasses, which are like kind of like not zombies, like people who died or there's like a disease, and in the game, like you can fight them. And it's like, and this one increases your attack on humans. And I'm like, what humans am I fighting? And then I realized like, oh, all the mini bosses where everybody's wearing an animal mask, or they're all humans. I'm like, oh, I guess I could use it on them, but they're like, every now and then you fight a mini boss that's a human, and like there's like one boss fight with a human. So I'm like, it's just so weird. It's like, why would I use this? And I'm like, oh yeah, there's these mini dudes that show up and yada yada. But yeah, it's a really good game. I think it's a lot of fun. But yeah, it's funny watching NL play it and just see like which bosses he struggles on that maybe I didn't, or which ones he just gets through the first phase real quick. And because he's also like, you know, talking to chat and whatnot. So it's like, you know, but yeah, it's a fun game. I look forward to playing more of it. And I think it, like, if I remember correctly, like I think like the ending hints at like where they could go next.
Ooh, that'd be
from
cool.
what I recall.
Sequel for it.
Yeah, like not a direct like a sequel, but within a different like fairy tale. So instead of Pinocchio, like something else.
That's a very cool idea.
But I don't remember what it was, but I remember like it was hinted at. I know there's also like multiple endings. I think there's like 3 endings. So I'm just going to get whatever ending I get. I'll just watch the other ending. I'm not going to, like I did for Elden Ring, I'm just going to watch what they are. I'm not going to really care about doing it and getting the other ones. But yeah, great game. And then I'm trying to look at my notes here. Man, so my kid was going to have like a play date with some friends from school, and I'm like, he does have a TV in his room or anything. So like, what? I looked and I was at Best Buy, and there's like this 32 that was on sale, and with some credits, I get it like for $30. So I'm like, okay, I'll go pick up this TV. It's like an Insignia, Amazon Fire TV, whatever. I'm like, good enough, LCD. You can hook up a Switch, play some Mario Party or on there and whatnot. So I get this thing and I bring it home. Yeah, cheap ass little. I don't know why I thought it'd be bigger. I'm so used to like big TV boxes that when the guy came out to my car to drop it off, I'm like, oh, it's fucking super small. I don't know why I think I wouldn't have room to fit a 32 in my thing. I think because when I bought a 32 back in the day, maybe I bought a 42. No, it was like a 32, maybe a little bigger, 36.
Like chunky.
Might have been 36. Yeah, it's like it's thick, it's big, like the bezels are huge. So it's like my memories of like a TV that size, like an entry level TV back in 2006, is so much bigger in my head than what they are now. But anyways, so I got to hook it up, and it's like, okay, it's an Amazon Fire TV. It's like, okay, what's your network? And I'm like, okay, hook up the network. It's like, okay, we're gonna look for updates. So like it downloads updates, then it installs and it restarts. It downloads more updates and installs it. It went through 3 cycles of downloading updates and restarting. I'm like, what the fuck?
This is excessive for a fucking TV.
You're a TV, man. I don't care about the Amazon part. I just want, like, I'm curious, like, if I didn't have an internet connection, could I just go to input 2? Like, I don't remember a skip, like, at all. Like, hey, find your network. And I'd be like, skip for now, like, for the setup. Like, can I just 1.0 it out the box and just go to input 2 and play the Switch? Like, why the hell?
If I don't have this plugged into internet, is it still a TV?
Yeah, right? That's how it felt. It's like the subsidizes of making it an Amazon Fire TV felt like, man, I got to do all these updates. But it was just so annoying. I'm like, dude, this is not plug and play, man. Like, what the fuck? I was so mad just sitting there. Luckily, and it got finished before his friends came over, but it was just like so annoying. Like, it's fucking TV, man. Because it was like, when I bought my LG, it's not like that. It's just like, it's on, there you go. Maybe it scans and goes, hey, there's an update for a TV. You want to install? I could just say no, but I can still use the TV like out the box.
Or Samsung TVs are like that too.
It's just frustrating. But and then my freaking, so my desk I have, so I got like, an L-shaped desk, L-shaped corner desk, and there's like a little shelf in the bottom section where I have my PC on. It's like perfect spot for like a PC. It's like kind of, I guess, what you would put there. I don't remember if in the marketing it says it, but anyways, so I have my PC there. It's like, it's there. And then I had like this, it's got the USB port on the top of the case. So I'd plug in my USB-C cord there for when I need to charge my headset, or if I'm going to use a PlayStation remote on my PC to play games with. I'm like, I'll do that instead of putting it in the back. So I just put it there, and it just kind of dangles out the front. And like, sometimes I'll unplug it and I'll like put it down, but I don't really fling it under the desk as much. So then like if I turn around and I get up, sometimes it'll catch on my foot. And usually I'm quick to realize, oh, it's caught, and I'll get off. But like twice now, I've just like walked off with it wrapped around my foot and just yanked off the front panel of the PC. And I'm like, God damn it. I'm like, how strong is this?
God.
It's like, because it's just like if you want to take it off, you can take it off. You just got to apply some pressure, because it's just like got pop-in pins or whatever for the front part of the case. But like twice I've done it now. I'm like, God damn, like how strong is this USB cable? I need like an angle, like a little like USB 90-degree angle like I have for the other part of it, and then just have like a, MagSafe like quick release.
MagSafe quick release?
Like just something that way if I catch it again, I'm like, oh, I try to loop it around the back of the part here, so I hopefully I don't do that anymore, but I'm like, nah, I can't. It just doesn't work. But like, yeah, I like ripped it off. I was looking, I was like, man, why is the first time I did, I was like, why is the front of my case look kind of weird? And I was like, why is it sticking out further than normal? Like, oh, it's like the top part's popped off. And then, yeah, I guess it's like dislocating your shoulder. Like, I do it once. Now it's like pretty, granted, I did yank it out pretty hard the second time as well. But I was like, God damn it. It's just.
I always worry about like yanking cables out and like breaking them or knocking the computer over. I've never thought about like ripping pieces off my computer. New fear unlocked.
Yeah, at least I didn't like break the USB like port that I use. Like,
the port just like rips out.
Yeah, like oops, like, but, so that's good. But Man, and I wish there was like a way to like easily control monitor switching. Like, you know, the monitors have like, you know, auto switching, like, oh, hey, this input went away. We can tell there's input on this one. So it switches over. But I hate when it does that shit where I'm like, when I play PlayStation and then it's like, I'm on HDMI 2 on my monitor and it's like, oh, there's an update on your PlayStation 5. And so I download the update, but it restarts. But because it restarts, it then switches back to the PC input. I'm like, bruh, like, stop. So I got then I got to go back to HDMI 2, but I got to hope that the PS5 is done its full reboot phase. So I was like, I'm just going to turn it off. But then if I turn it off, there are times where like, man, I wish it was back on, but I don't want to have to like dig through the settings. I wish there was like a shortcut I could do, like quickly change it. And also, I know there's like if your monitor has like a KVM switch, or a cam switch rather, you could just do that where if you hook it up, everything to it, you can just hit a button and do a macro. But that's not how I hook all my stuff up. I have like a hub. And as I was looking, I was like, there's got to be like a way to do it remotely. And there are like apparently monitor scripts programs you can download to where you can set like a key shortcut to change inputs on your keyboard that acts as a cam switch instead of having to do it through the monitor. But I was like, this seems like a lot of work. But I was like, man, I really should just do that because I'm like, I want to be able to just switch inputs at any time. Just give me like a control F1, bam. Now I'm on HDMI 2 or I'm on DisplayPort or whatever. But it's like I have this love-hate relationship with auto switching inputs. But it's just annoying. This is like the rant portion.
I was thinking that. I was like, this is where he tells us about this random pet peeve for the day.
Yeah. I even have another one, but I'm like, I'm gonna leave it. I'm like, whatever. I'm not gonna I won't touch this one. It's so off topic. It's not even related to games at all. But anyways. All right, well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. So thank you for all tuning in. Listen. Thank you, Isli. Thank you, Zai, for joining.
Yep.
And we'll see you all next time.
Later.